The Iron Triangle did not look special on a map. It was just a wedge of land northwest of Saigon, bordered by the Saigon River, the Thi Tin River, and the main road stretching toward the city. But soldiers who stepped into it understood the truth. This place was built for ambush. The jungle was thick, tangled, and heavy with humidity. Trails ran like narrow veins through the undergrowth. Every path felt tight. Every tree root looked like a trap waiting to snag your boot. And every shadow felt darker than it should have been. The land itself worked against you. During daylight, American patrols struggled just to move. At night, movement became a different test entirely. The Iron Triangle turned pitch black. No moonlight could slip through the dense canopy. Soldiers could barely see the man in front of them. The jungle swallowed shapes, twisted sounds, and erased your sense of direction. Even experienced troops said the place felt unnatural after sunset. It was too quiet at times, then too loud, then quiet again. A rhythm that made your skin tighten. The terrain looked simple from above. Helicopter crews saw green patches, small clearings, and winding streams. But on the ground, everything changed. The jungle floor was uneven. Thick layers of dead leaves muffled footsteps and also hid danger. Tree trunks rose like pillars, covered in vines and hanging roots. The air carried weight, hot and wet, making every breath feel slow. Sweat soaked through uniforms, helmets, and flak jackets within minutes. Boots became heavy with mud. Mosquitoes hovered in clouds. And underneath all of it lay the hidden threat, the Viet Cong tunnel network. The Iron Triangle wasn't just jungle, it was a fortress. Beneath the soil stretched hundreds of tunnels, dug by hand, connecting bunkers, command posts, sleeping quarters, supply caches, and escape routes. These tunnels allowed the Viet Cong to disappear, reappear, and strike without warning. American patrols could walk right over an enemy unit and never know it. That uncertainty changed how men moved. Every step felt watched. Every silence felt staged. Patrols entering the region followed strict spacing rules. At night, soldiers kept several meters apart, enough to avoid bunching, but close enough to maintain awareness. The point man led, scanning the ground for signs of traps, disturbed soil, unnatural mounds, broken twigs, or wires stretched inches above the earth. Behind him, the second man covered the flanks. The RTO stayed in the center, protecting the radio. The rear security soldier walked backward at times, listening for pursuit. No one talked. Communication relied on taps and hand signals. Even small noises, canteen caps, gear rubbing, loose metal, were checked and taped down before stepping off. Noise discipline mattered because the Viet Cong listened. They knew the forest better than any map or scout. They moved like the jungle belonged to them. American units often felt like guests in someone else's home. At night, that feeling deepened. The jungle seemed to speak a different language. Crickets chirped until something disturbed them. Frogs croaked and then went silent. Leaves shifted without wind. These small cues warned soldiers that they were not alone. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. With lights off to avoid detection, patrols moved slowly, one step at a time. The point man touched the ground with his boot before shifting his weight. He felt for traps. He felt for roots. He felt for changes in the soil. Every sound seemed magnified. A snapped twig felt as loud as a firecracker. A cough felt like a shout. Men controlled their breathing. They tightened grips on their rifles. Their eyes adjusted to the dark, searching for tiny differences. Shadows that moved, brush that bent, shapes that didn't look right. The Iron Triangle had a reputation long before many American soldiers set foot there. Units reported ambushes that came fast and close. Booby traps were placed in patterns that forced patrols into kill zones. Mines were hidden under leaves or tied above head level as swinging spikes. Even the paths themselves felt designed to trap you. They narrowed at odd points, curved around thick trees, or dipped sharply into small ditches. These funnels made soldiers easy targets. The Viet Cong knew exactly where to wait. The first time a soldier entered the Iron Triangle at night, he felt the weight of history. Stories passed through units, patrols that vanished, patrols that walked into perfect ambushes, patrols that heard movement but never saw who followed them. Veterans of the region carried a quiet tension in their shoulders. They checked their gear twice. They scanned 3 times instead of once. New soldiers learned quickly to match that mindset. Heat added another layer of difficulty. Even at night, the air stayed warm and wet. Sweat drenched uniforms and made grips slippery. Mosquitoes bit through thin fabric. Leeches crawled up boots. Soldiers wiped their faces only when they knew it was safe. Any big movement risked noise. Endurance mattered. The jungle tested patience more than strength. A man who rushed made mistakes. A man who made mistakes didn't last long. The Iron Triangle forced American patrols to move differently. They adopted slower rhythms, tighter sectors of fire, and better coordination. Squad leaders listened more and talked less. They trusted the point man's instincts. Small details, footprints, bent grass, faint smells of smoke, became clues. Every patrol member had to stay alert. Fear wasn't a weakness here. It was information. It kept men alive. American units respected the landscape and the enemy who mastered it. They understood why this region remained a Viet Cong stronghold for so long. The combination of tunnels, terrain, darkness, and silence turned the Iron Triangle into one of the most dangerous areas in Vietnam. And every patrol that entered at night carried the same hope. Make it through without being seen, without triggering a trap, and without walking into a perfect ambush. American patrols feared the Iron Triangle at night, but the Viet Cong moved through it with calm confidence. For them, the darkness was not a barrier. It was a tool. The jungle at night favored those who understood its rhythm, and the Viet Cong understood it better than anyone. They had grown up with its sounds, its shadows, and its dangers. They knew how to read the forest the same way others read a map. When night fell, they became the advantage. The Viet Cong rarely operated in large formations at night. Instead, they moved in small groups of 3 to 6 fighters, lean teams that could slip through brush without making noise. Each man carried only what he needed: an AK-47 or SKS rifle, a small pouch of ammunition, rice, and sometimes grenades. Their gear was simple but effective. No metal clanked, no loose straps swung. Everything was tied down or wrapped in cloth. Their sandals, cut from old tires, gripped the earth without leaving deep footprints. Even their clothing blended with the environment, faded black or brown shirts and trousers that made them melt into the shadows. Movement was slow and silent. The point man stepped first, placing his foot carefully to test the ground. He avoided dry branches, piles of leaves, or roots that could snap. Behind him, the next fighter matched his steps almost exactly. They stayed close enough to maintain visual contact, but far enough to avoid being hit by a single burst of fire. Their spacing varied with terrain, tighter in dense jungle, wider in open patches. Unlike American patrols, which sometimes spoke in whispers, the Viet Cong used no voices at all. Hand signals were enough. Sometimes the point man used nothing but a small finger movement or a shift of shoulders. Communication didn't need to be complex when every man understood his job deeply. The Viet Cong knew the Iron Triangle so well that they could sense when something was wrong. A bird call at the wrong time signaled movement. A patch of grass bent the wrong way meant someone passed recently. A faint smell of sweat or gun oil revealed foreign presence. They used these small signs to track American patrols from a distance, often staying just out of sight. At night, they could follow a unit for hours without ever revealing themselves. American soldiers rarely knew they were being watched. The environment helped them. Thick trees and dense undergrowth blocked moonlight. The air stayed heavy and still. Sound behaved strangely in this darkness, bouncing unevenly off branches and trunks. The Viet Cong used these distortions to judge distance. They listened not only for noise but for breaks in natural patterns, the sudden silence of insects or the change in frog calls. These details told them more than footprints ever could. Tunnels made the Viet Cong even more effective. The Iron Triangle contained one of the largest tunnel networks in Vietnam. Hundreds of entrances were hidden beneath leaves, inside termite mounds, or behind false walls. Fighters could disappear underground in seconds, travel beneath American patrols, and emerge somewhere completely unexpected. These tunnels gave them unmatched mobility. At night, they used them to reposition quickly, launch ambushes, or escape before American units could react. Their ambush tactics relied on patience. A Viet Cong team could lie in wait for hours, unmoving, hidden behind foliage or inside spider holes. They didn't rush. They waited for the perfect moment, when an American patrol bunched up, stepped into a narrow path, or hesitated at a crossroads. The VC learned to anticipate where units would pause, where they would cross streams, and where they would slow down. They turned these predictable moments into kill zones. At night, the Viet Cong struck with precision. They used short, focused bursts of fire, never long sprays that gave away position. Their goal wasn't to destroy an entire patrol at once. It was to deliver quick damage, create confusion, and fade back into the jungle. Often they attacked from the flanks or rear, where American units were most vulnerable. If the patrol's RTO was visible, he became a primary target. Knocking out communication made the unit blind and alone. Sometimes the Viet Cong launched diversion tactics. They fired a single shot to draw attention, then hit from a different direction. Or they tossed rocks to create noise and test reactions. They learned to read a patrol by how it moved after hearing a sound. If the Americans tightened spacing, the VC noted it. If they slowed down, the VC adjusted. If they rushed forward, the VC used that speed against them. Another advantage came from mindset. Viet Cong fighters accepted the dangers of night as normal. Many grew up in villages bordering the Iron Triangle. They fished at night, hunted at night, and traveled unlit paths since childhood. Their senses adapted to low-light environments. They weren't afraid of the darkness. To them, the jungle at night felt familiar. This mental comfort gave them a calmness American troops struggled to match. The VC also believed in the value of patience. They didn't fear waiting. They could sit still for long stretches, breathing slowly, listening to every sound. This patience made them lethal. American patrols often moved too fast or too loudly without realizing it. A single misplaced footstep could reveal their presence. The Viet Cong waited for these mistakes. Their understanding of terrain gave them tactical advantage. They memorized routes, water sources, and natural choke points. They knew which trails collapsed under heavy weight and which stayed firm. They recognized where moonlight slipped through gaps in the canopy and used those patches as observation points. They avoided areas where American units set up ambushes. And when they wanted to disappear, they did, moving through brush so quietly that even nearby soldiers failed to hear them. Psychologically, the Viet Cong understood how fear worked. They used it deliberately. They whispered sometimes, not words, but sounds meant to unsettle. They mimicked animals to mask movement. They used distant shots to provoke anxiety. They planted traps not only to injure, but to slow American patrols with caution. Every delay increased their advantage. Above all, the Viet Cong believed nighttime belonged to them. And in the Iron Triangle, that belief became reality. Their tactics, discipline, terrain knowledge, and mindset combined into a force that made American patrols feel exposed, uncertain, and outmatched every time the sun went down. For American soldiers, entering the Iron Triangle at night was like stepping into another world. Daylight patrols were difficult enough, but darkness added a layer of fear that even experienced troops struggled to hide. The jungle swallowed light, sound twisted in strange directions, and every step felt like walking into the unknown. No matter how much training a soldier had, the Iron Triangle forced him to operate on instinct, discipline, and raw endurance. A nighttime patrol usually began with quiet preparation. Soldiers checked gear one last time, tightening straps, securing canteens, taping metal parts, and testing radios. No one wanted to make noise once they moved out. Talking stopped. Even whispers were kept to a minimum. Men communicated with nods, hand signs, and small taps on the shoulder. The tension built before the first step onto the trail. Everyone knew that once they crossed into the dark, the margin for error disappeared. Patrol formation followed strict rules. The point man took the lead, scanning the ground with every step. He watched for tripwires, loose soil, or anything that seemed out of place. Behind him came the second scout, then the squad leader, the RTO with the radio, and the rest of the team, ending with the rear security soldier who constantly checked behind them. Spacing stayed tight but careful, enough distance to avoid being hit together, but close enough to maintain control. At night, this spacing felt even more important. A soldier who drifted too far risked becoming lost or walking into danger alone. The jungle changed at night. Every sound felt sharper, heavier. Wind through the leaves sounded like movement. A snapping twig could be a deer or an enemy scout only meters away. Some parts of the Iron Triangle grew too quiet after sunset. Crickets stopped. Frogs went silent. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Soldiers learned to recognize these changes. Silence meant danger, and danger meant someone was nearby, watching. Hyper-vigilance became a survival instinct. Soldiers scanned constantly. Left, right, up into trees, down at the ground. Their hands stayed on their rifles, fingers hovered close to triggers. Eyes adjusted to darkness slowly, focusing on shapes rather than details. Many described seeing shadows move, even if nothing was there. The jungle played tricks, but those tricks could never be ignored. In Vietnam, hesitation killed as quickly as gunfire. The weight of gear added another challenge. An American soldier carried a helmet, M16 rifle, several magazines, grenades, water, radio batteries, medical supplies, and sometimes claymores or machine gun ammunition. The total weight often reached 50 to 70 pounds. In the heat and humidity of the Iron Triangle, that weight became punishing. Sweat drenched uniforms and made grips slippery. Boots grew heavier with mud. Bugs crawled into clothing, biting and irritating skin. And still, men moved slowly and silently through it all. Lack of sleep affected judgment. Night patrols often followed long hours of daytime operations. Soldiers marched tired, hungry, and mentally drained. Rest came in short bursts. 20 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Never enough to recover fully. Some men nodded off while standing, only to snap awake when the point man raised his fist to signal a halt. Fatigue made every sound more alarming. It magnified fear and sharpened stress, but soldiers learned to push through it because they had no choice. Every man carried personal fears, mines buried beneath leaves, booby traps rigged at knee height, hidden pits lined with spikes. The fear of stepping on something unseen stayed with them throughout the mission. The Viet Cong used traps not only to injure but to slow American patrols. Every time a trap was discovered, the patrols stopped, checked the area, and moved even slower. Fear of the unseen weighed heavier than the gear they carried. The psychological pressure of patrolling at night was intense. Soldiers couldn't see far. They felt watched. Some said they sensed eyes on them long before contact happened. Veterans described the feeling as a tightness in the chest or a cold line down the spine. Others felt a mix of alertness and dread. The Iron Triangle amplified these emotions because the Viet Cong operated here with skill and confidence. The sense of being hunted was real. Point men felt the most pressure. They walked first, exposed to the highest danger. They learned to read terrain like a second language, displaced leaves, odd footprints, shapes that didn't match the environment. Some point men developed instincts that saved entire squads. If something felt wrong, they stopped immediately. No one questioned these pauses. Instinct kept men alive. Radio operators also felt the weight of responsibility. The radio was the lifeline to artillery, helicopters, and command. The Viet Cong targeted RTOs first during ambushes. The long antenna made them unmistakable in the dark. Many RTOs wrapped their antennas with dark cloth or bent them to reduce visibility. They marched knowing a single flash from their position could make them the first casualty. Rear security soldiers had their own fear. They walked backward at times, scanning behind the patrol. In the Iron Triangle, attacks often came from the rear. The Viet Cong were experts at slipping behind a unit, stalking quietly, and striking at the moment when soldiers felt safe. Rear security troops learned the same hyper-vigilance as point men. Despite the fear, trust held these patrols together. Soldiers relied on each other completely. The point man trusted the rear guard. The RTO trusted the squad leader. Each man trusted that the others would do their part silently, carefully, and without panic. Camaraderie built from shared fear became one of their strongest weapons. Men followed leaders they respected. They watched each other's backs, shared water, and warned each other through simple gestures. Some patrols completed missions without contact. Others walked directly into ambushes. A few made it back with minor injuries. Others lost friends in seconds. But every man who patrolled the Iron Triangle at night remembered the feeling, the tension, the strain, the tight grip on a rifle, and the constant awareness that danger lived in every shadow. The Iron Triangle taught American soldiers a difficult lesson. Fear was not weakness. Fear was information. Fear kept them alert. Fear kept them alive. Nighttime contact in the Iron Triangle happened fast, faster than most soldiers expected. One moment, the jungle felt silent and heavy. The next, everything exploded into light, noise, and confusion. American patrols didn't fear firepower. They had plenty of that. What they feared was the uncertainty, the panic that followed the first burst, the way darkness swallowed direction, and the feeling that the enemy was everywhere at once. Most night ambushes began the same way, with a sound that didn't fit. A faint click, a rustle, a footstep that seemed too heavy. Sometimes, no sound at all, just a sudden flash. The Viet Cong were experts in timing. They waited until the patrol entered the tightest part of the trail, or when spacing collapsed at a narrow bend. They used natural choke points created by trees, streams, or fallen logs. Locations where a squad had no room to maneuver. The first shots were always close, sometimes only a few meters away. Short, controlled bursts from AK-47s or SKS rifles. The muzzle flashes lit up the trees, turning shadows into momentary color. For a second, the patrol saw the shapes of leaves and trunks as if struck by lightning. Then darkness swallowed everything again. American soldiers had to react instantly. Training took over before thought. The squad leader shouted a direction, contact right, or sometimes no one shouted at all. Relying on instinct and practice drills, men dropped low, seeking cover behind anything available. A tree trunk, a mound of earth, a ditch along the trail. The radio operator pressed into the ground, shielding the handset. The machine gunner swung his M60 toward the sound of gunfire, firing short bursts to suppress. But sound at night didn't travel cleanly. Trees bent noise. Echoes bounced. A gunshot from the right sometimes sounded like it came from above. A grenade explosion felt like it came from multiple angles at once. Soldiers needed seconds, long, terrifying seconds, to determine the real direction of attack. In those moments, chaos ruled. The Viet Cong exploited this confusion. Their goal wasn't to destroy the entire patrol at once. It was to disorient them, inflict casualties, and slip away before the Americans reorganized. They fired from multiple points, 2 shots here, 3 shots there, to make it seem like a larger force. They used grenades sparingly, saving them for the critical moment when the patrol hesitated. Some ambushes came from above. Viet Cong fighters sometimes climbed trees or hid on elevated ground. Their first shots struck from angles American troops didn't expect. The initial burst often targeted the point man or the RTO. Taking out the radio operator isolated the patrol. Without communication, calling artillery or flares became nearly impossible. Once the first shots landed, American soldiers struggled to regain control. They tried to form a defensive perimeter, but darkness made it difficult. Leaders shouted spacing orders. Riflemen crawled to new positions, scanning for movement. The M60 gunner fired in controlled arcs to keep enemy heads down. Sometimes flare guns were used to light the area. A single flare shot into the sky turned the jungle white for a few seconds, revealing shapes and silhouettes. But flares had their own risks. The sudden brightness blinded night-adjusted eyes. When the light faded, everything seemed darker than before. The Viet Cong waited for these moments, shifting positions while Americans struggled to readjust. Some VC fighters even fired at flares to make them burst prematurely. Communication inside the squad was limited. Men passed information through taps, shouts, and instinct. Grenadiers launched 40mm rounds into suspected positions. Riflemen fired controlled bursts, careful not to reveal their exact locations. Ammunition had to be conserved. Spraying wildly wasted rounds and created confusion. Discipline made the difference. A squad with calm leadership could slowly push back the chaos. Break contact drills were the most important survival tool. When an ambush hit too hard, the squad leader ordered a retreat in a controlled pattern. The front men threw smoke grenades or delivered suppressing fire. The rear men shifted first, falling back several meters and taking new positions. Then the front moved again. This leapfrog style prevented panic. It kept the patrol from collapsing into a mob. But executing a break contact drill at night was brutal. Soldiers tripped over roots. Equipment snagged on vines. Men crawled through mud, unsure if they were moving away from the enemy or toward another threat. The Viet Cong knew this and sometimes pursued for a short distance, firing from the flanks or tossing grenades before disappearing. Not all contact was a full ambush. Sometimes patrols stumbled into a Viet Cong scout team by accident. 2 or 3 shots cracked from the brush. A tree splintered. A soldier hit the ground. The entire squad froze, waiting for the next move. These short contacts often turned into tense standoffs. Americans held positions. The Viet Cong disappeared. No one wanted to move first. Minutes felt like hours. Other engagements began when an American soldier sensed danger and halted the patrol. A smell of cigarette smoke, fresh footprints, a shift in insect noise. Moments later, a Viet Cong patrol crossed ahead, and both sides opened fire in a burst of confusion. These chance encounters often ended quickly, with each side breaking away to avoid a prolonged fight. Artillery support was a lifeline. If the patrol maintained radio contact, the RTO called for illumination or HE rounds. Flares from artillery batteries lit the sky, casting long shadows. Explosions echoed through the trees. The ground shook. The noise alone often forced Viet Cong fighters to withdraw. But calling artillery required clear communication, calm leadership, and a moment of safety, all difficult to achieve under close engagement. Even after contact ended, the fear didn't go away. Soldiers scanned the trees, breathing hard, gripping rifles tightly. Every sound made them flinch. Every shadow seemed alive. Moving out again required courage. No one knew if the ambush was over or if the Viet Cong waited just ahead for a second strike. Nighttime contact in the Iron Triangle taught American soldiers a harsh lesson. Survival depended on discipline, teamwork, and the ability to think clearly when everything around them fell apart. Chaos came quickly, control returned slowly, and every patrol that survived the night earned a deeper respect for the enemy that owned the darkness. The Iron Triangle left a mark on every American soldier who patrolled it at night. Some regions in Vietnam were dangerous, some were unpredictable. But the Iron Triangle earned a reputation that lived far beyond the war itself. Veterans spoke of it with a tone different from other battlefields, quieter, heavier, and filled with the respect that came from surviving a place built for ambush. The fear soldiers carried there didn't end when they stepped out of the jungle. It followed them home, shaping the way they remembered the war. The first part of that legacy came from experience. Many soldiers learned quickly that the Iron Triangle was a Viet Cong battlefield, designed with purpose. The tunnels allowed fighters to vanish without trace. Hidden spider holes placed enemy eyes only yards away. Trails funneled patrols into kill zones. And at night, these advantages multiplied. Soldiers walked knowing every step might be watched. Every sound might draw fire. Every shadow might hide danger. It wasn't superstition, it was fact. And it changed the way they moved and fought. Commanders understood this as well. After repeated nighttime contact, after action reports made it clear, the Viet Cong dominated darkness in the Iron Triangle. Their tunnel networks supported rapid movement. Their scouts predicted American routes. Their ambushes hit fast and disappeared even faster. Units that normally operated with confidence began requesting more artillery coverage, more flares, and more support when entering the region after sunset. The fear wasn't weakness, it was realism. Interviews with veterans decades later confirmed that the Iron Triangle shaped their thinking about small unit tactics. Many described how the jungle felt alive at night, not literally moving, but constantly shifting in mood and sound. Some explained how their senses sharpened after their first contact. They learned to hear small details, footsteps on soft soil, distant whispers, or the crack of a twig under pressure. These senses faded after the war but returned instantly in memory. The Viet Cong contributed to this lasting reputation. They respected soldiers who adapted. They also noticed fear. Captured documents and interrogations showed references to American patrols avoiding certain routes at night. VC units mentioned how Americans tightened formation too much or hesitated at crossroads, small cues that signaled uncertainty. The Viet Cong understood psychological warfare. They used it deliberately. A single unexpected sound at night could freeze an entire patrol. A false trail could slow movement and increase tension. Sometimes the VC didn't need to attack. Making their presence known was enough to control the battlefield. The Americans adapted over time. Leaders changed tactics, tightening noise discipline, and teaching soldiers how to move more slowly. Night movement drills became more common. Units practiced break contact procedures in low light. Some squads stopped relying on visible signals and shifted to touch-based communication. Point men learned to read terrain like trackers. They followed subtle clues, damp soil, crushed grass, or smoke drifting low through trees. These lessons were hard-earned, often learned through loss. Fear shaped discipline. Soldiers became more patient. They walked slower. They trusted each other more deeply. A patrol that panicked would not survive long. The Iron Triangle forced teamwork, forcing squads to act as one. Veterans later said the place taught you to grow up fast. Young soldiers became seasoned in days, not months. Every decision carried weight, and hesitation could cost lives. Another part of the legacy came from the tunnels. The underground network captured American imaginations long after the war. Stories of tunnel rats crawling into pitch-black spaces, hearing movement inches away, or fighting in tight chambers added to the triangle's myth. Tunnels represented something deeper than physical danger. They represented a war fought in layers. Above ground, patrols moved through thick jungle. Below ground, an unseen world connected hundreds of fighters. The Americans respected this ingenuity. They also feared what they couldn't see. The Iron Triangle also influenced future military doctrine. Modern infantry training includes lessons from Vietnam, better noise discipline, improved spacing, and an understanding of how terrain affects sound and movement. Night operations became more structured. Communication methods shifted. Patrol leaders studied how to control panic and maintain order during sudden contact. These practices can be traced back to hard lessons learned in places like the Iron Triangle, but the strongest legacy came from the men who walked those trails. Their stories carried emotional weight. They remembered the heat, the insects, the mud, and the constant tension. Many recalled how fear sharpened their senses, how they could smell cooking rice from a distance, or how they learned that silence meant danger. Others described the emotional toll, the tightness in their chest before stepping onto a dark trail, the way they whispered to each other even after returning to base, or the relief of seeing first light break through the canopy. Survival created bonds that lasted a lifetime. Soldiers trusted their squad mates completely. They shared water, protected each other in contact, and stayed alert together. After the war, these bonds remained strong. Veterans spoke of friends lost and friends who saved their lives in moments of case. They remembered the point men who stopped at the right time, the RTOs who risked being targeted, and the squad leaders who stayed calm under fire. The enemy respected them too. Vietnamese veterans later spoke about American patrols that adapted and fought well. They mentioned units that moved quietly, spread out carefully, and reacted with discipline. This mutual respect did not erase the ferocity of the conflict, but it showed that both sides understood the difficulty of fighting in such a harsh environment. By the end of the war, the Iron Triangle maintained its fearsome reputation. Maps marked it as a high-risk zone. Patrol leaders warned new soldiers about it. Veterans spoke its name with seriousness. The darkness there created a legacy of tension and caution that shaped American memory for decades. The fear American patrols carried wasn't weakness. It was awareness. It was the understanding that the enemy was skilled, disciplined, and confident in the night. It was recognition of the environment's power. And it was the knowledge that in the Iron Triangle, danger lived in every shadow, waiting, watching, and ready to strike.